The galaxy had always whispered her name. In distant colonies, in crowded spaceports, in the quiet edges of the void, Empress Zirha was a legend. Some called her a nightmare, some a goddess, but all knew one thing: where she went, destruction followed. Ships disappeared, planets fell silent, and fleets that dared resist turned to burning wreckage. She was called the universe's greatest terror, and for centuries, no one had seen her stopped. Yet on a small, unremarkable planet on the edge of known space, a human watched her from afar and did not see a monster. Kale came from Varkesh Prime, a death world infamous even among the hardiest humans. Its deserts could burn skin in minutes, its storms could rip ships from orbit, and its predators had teeth sharp enough to snap bone as easily as twigs. Life there was not kind, nor fair, nor forgiving. You either adapted or you died. Kale had survived longer than most because he had learned to watch, to wait, and to strike only when necessary. Now Kale was far from Varkesh Prime. He had traveled the stars as a scout, a trader, and occasionally a soldier. The Galactic Council had sent him on a mission of observation to study the Zalnath Dominion, the empire ruled by the dreaded Empress Zirha. Kale knew that approaching her would be dangerous. Everyone who entered her court uninvited or unprepared rarely lived to tell the story. But Kale also knew something else. The strongest survival skills were not always physical. Sometimes, understanding, patience, and subtlety could save more lives than any weapon. He arrived aboard the Council's small diplomatic shuttle, its sleek silver hull reflecting distant stars. As the craft approached the Zalnath capital, Kale could see it, a city of towers rising from a jagged black rock, surrounded by fleets that gleamed like knives in the void. Ships came and went with flawless precision, forming and dissolving patterns Kale could almost read. The Zalnath were disciplined to the point of perfection. Kale's shuttle landed on a platform suspended above the city by magnetic fields. The air was thin and tinged with ozone, a product of the city's energy reactors. Kale adjusted his coat and stepped out, his senses alert. Every movement, every shadow could be a threat. And here, in the heart of her empire, danger was everywhere. The palace itself was immense, a fortress of black crystalline structures that seemed to absorb light. Kale had read the descriptions: countless halls, endless guards, traps, and rooms where only the Empress herself could tread. The Zalnath believed in fear as a tool, and Kale could feel it in the air, a weight pressing down, testing him even before he met the ruler. He was led into a waiting room, not by soldiers but by advisors. They were tall, humanoid in shape, but with extra limbs, eyes that shifted like liquid, and skin that shimmered in colors Kale couldn't name. They studied him quietly, speaking in a language he only partly understood, translated by his calm device. Every word was polite, yet sharp. Every gesture was measured, yet dangerous. Kale understood that one wrong move could be fatal. Then she appeared. Empress Zirha entered silently, her presence filling the room in a way that was almost physical. She was taller than most humans, her skin a dark iridescent shade that seemed to reflect the very room around her. Her eyes were sharp, piercing, and intelligent beyond reckoning. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, and yet there was a grace to it that Kale couldn't ignore. He had expected terror. He had expected wrath. But he found something else, a quiet intensity, a focus that bordered on loneliness. Kale bowed, careful not to overdo it. The Empress inclined her head once, observing him. It was not a warm gesture nor a friendly one, but it was not hostile either. It was assessment, pure and simple. "You are human," she said. Her voice was smooth, yet carried weight. "Kale of Varkesh Prime, the Council sends you to observe. Why do you not fear me? And I know that monsters often wear masks." He watched how the Empress ruled, strict, precise, almost absolute control over her advisors and generals. She did not strike without reason, nor did she celebrate the destruction she caused. Her methods were efficient, ruthless, and terrifying, but not cruel for the sake of cruelty. Kale began to notice patterns, hints of thought beneath the fearsome exterior. The Empress tested everyone around her, pushing them to limits that would break lesser beings. Yet sometimes she paused. Sometimes she lingered on objects or reports, almost wistful. One evening, Kale was summoned to the inner court, a vast chamber of black glass and crystal towers. The Empress awaited him alone. He had been warned that few ever entered this room without deadly consequences. He did not know what he expected, perhaps a test, perhaps death itself. "You survive because you are clever," Zirha said quietly. "Few humans have ever come this far. Why do you endure?" "To act where others hesitate. Yet sometimes, I wonder if anyone truly understands what it means to rule." He noticed the small things, the way the Empress lingered by a window when no one watched, gazing at the stars. The way she examined relics from her ancestors, her expression softening. Even the way she occasionally allowed a soldier or advisor a private audience without fear of reprisal. These moments were rare, but they spoke of something hidden beneath the terrifying exterior. One afternoon, Kale witnessed a test of loyalty among her generals. A false rumor of treachery had been spread, and the Empress watched silently as her commanders argued, some trembling, some defiant. She did not strike immediately. Instead, she observed, learning, calculating. And then, with a single command, she revealed the truth and punished the guilty. Kale recognized that such precision required more than cruelty. It required intellect, understanding, and a vision no one else could grasp. Kale realized he was beginning to see her differently. The galaxy called her a nightmare, but she was more than that. She was complex, calculating, and in some ways painfully alone. And he understood, in the way only someone who had lived among predators could, that she survived not just through power, but through necessity. One evening, as Kale prepared to leave the observation chamber, he noticed a flicker of vulnerability in her expression. A guard stumbled, and she did not strike him down immediately. Instead, she watched him struggle, almost curious, almost hesitant. It was a human expression in an alien form, a brief glimpse of what she might have been if the galaxy had allowed her to be more than a weapon. Kale understood then that this was his opportunity, not to conquer, not to destroy, but to reach her as few others could. He did not know if it would succeed, but he knew that understanding her was the first step toward survival, for both himself and, perhaps, for the galaxy. The next day, Kale was called to witness a demonstration of her fleets. Planets fell, defenses crumbled, and entire star systems were brought to heel. The galaxy would see only the terror. Kale saw the loneliness, the calculation, the isolation, the burden of being feared above all else. He realized then that the universe had misunderstood the Empress entirely. She was not a nightmare because she was evil. She was a nightmare because no one had ever tried to understand her. As Kale left the observation hall that evening, he paused, thinking of the long road ahead. The galaxy feared her. They would send armies, spies, and assassins. But Kale had a different plan. If he could survive long enough, if he could learn enough, if he could endure the dangers of her court, he might be able to show the galaxy something it had never seen. That even the most feared being in the universe might only be seeking something as simple and human as love. Kale returned to his quarters, the stars of the Zalnith Dominion reflecting in his eyes. He had survived the first test, but he knew there would be many more, and yet for the first time he felt a spark of hope, not just for himself, but for her. For Empress Zirha, the universe's greatest nightmare who might simply want to be understood, and in that hope, Kale found strength. Kale woke before the dim glow of the Zalnith city lights touched his quarters. The palace was quieter than he had expected, almost unnerving. Yet in that silence he could feel life moving, the soft hum of energy shields, the whisper of patrols, the distant thrum of massive engines in orbit. Everything here existed in perfect order, every detail calculated, every moment controlled. And Kale, human from a Deathworld, had to navigate it all. He dressed simply, his eyes sharp and alert. In Varkesh Prime, mornings often began with hunting storms and predators. Here, the danger was different but no less real. One wrong word, one careless glance, and even the Empress might turn her judgment against him. He had survived worse, but every instinct told him to remain vigilant. The day began with a council meeting. Kale entered cautiously, observing the tall, shimmering advisors. Their skin reflected the light in odd, fluid colors, and their extra limbs moved with a precision that made human muscles look clumsy. They spoke among themselves in a language of clicks and glides, which Kale's translator parsed almost instantly. Yet he realized that understanding the words was only half the battle. Meaning often lay in tone, in hesitation, in a gesture. The Empress entered the chamber, moving with her usual elegance and gravity. Every eye turned to her, every movement ceased. Kale could feel the subtle tension in the air, a collective holding of breath that signaled life and death hung on her next words. She did not raise her voice, she never did. Her presence alone carried authority. The council discussed new border conflicts, skirmishes with nearby star systems, and rumors of rebellion. Kale listened carefully. Humans trained on Deathworlds learned to notice patterns, anticipate danger, and understand motivations without being told. He watched the Empress' reactions, small tilts of her head, the flicker of her eyes, the way her fingers lightly tapped the polished surface before her. Each movement was a clue. After hours of discussion, Kale was led to a smaller chamber where he met a Zalnath general. The general was impressive, every bit as disciplined and intimidating as the legends claimed. Yet Kale noticed hesitation beneath the surface. This general had seen the Empress' wrath but also her subtle preferences. Humans like Kale understood such unspoken cues. Power was not only about force, it was about knowing when to bend and when to strike. The general spoke cautiously, almost as if testing Kale. Kale replied in careful, measured language, never giving offense but subtly showing his understanding of strategy. By the end of the conversation, the general gave a slight nod, a tiny acknowledgement of respect. Kale recognized the victory for what it was, survival through perception, not combat. Later, Kale was taken to the Empress' private library, a room far smaller than the council halls but far more dangerous. This was her personal space, filled with ancient texts, tactical archives, and records of her ancestors. The air smelled faintly of alien ink and resin. Kale could sense that every object in this room had significance, that every book and artifact had been chosen carefully. The Empress did not fill her space with noise or frivolity. She filled it with knowledge, with power, and with reminders of the weight she carried. "You observe," she said without turning. Her voice was soft here, almost intimate. "Do you see only the surface, or do you look deeper? But I also notice what is left unguarded. Fear often hides what is most valuable. We value life because it is fragile, yet we accept danger as part of it." He noticed the Empress' routines, her subtle expressions, the way she responded to praise, to challenge, to threat. The Zalnath lived in a world where obedience was survival, yet even they could not fully predict her. She tested them constantly, pushing them to limits that seemed impossible. And yet, Kale could see glimpses of curiosity, even wonder behind her calculated demeanor. One evening, Kale was assigned to accompany her on a walk across the palace gardens, a rare privilege, almost unheard of for outsiders. The gardens were suspended on platforms high above the city, with flowing pools of water and strange luminescent plants. They were peaceful, almost serene, a stark contrast to the fear and control that dominated the rest of the palace. Kale noticed the Empress walking slowly, touching the edges of a plant, observing its structure, and listening to the faint hum of energy it emitted. "Life persists," she said softly, almost to herself. "Even here, even in controlled space, it finds a way. But it is worth understanding." He was no longer just an observer. He became a participant in small ways. He helped advise on supply chains, fleet logistics, and even minor political disputes. Each time, he applied lessons from his Deathworld upbringing, predicting outcomes based on subtle cues, improvising solutions, and remaining calm under pressure. His actions were noted, though not always openly praised. The Empress rarely gave praise, but her trust, small as it was, grew. Kale also began to see her loneliness more clearly. The Empress ruled an empire where no one dared approach her with honesty. Her counselors obeyed, her generals feared, and her advisors flattered. But Kale's presence, his blunt honesty and human perspective, offered something different. She could not show it, but he noticed how her attention lingered when he spoke, how her eyes softened slightly when he solved a problem others could not. Then came the incident that tested Kale's understanding of her, and the first real danger he faced. A group of assassins had infiltrated the palace, intent on eliminating him as an envoy who had begun earning influence. Kale detected them through instinct and observation, noticing unusual movements, shadows out of place, and the faint vibration of weapons being primed. He acted quickly, using traps, misdirection, and the environment itself to neutralize the threat. When the Empress learned of it, she did not scold him, nor did she reward him. Instead, she observed him silently. "You survive because you are clever," she said almost approvingly. "Most would have failed, few humans could have done as you did." And in understanding her, he began to see a pattern. The Empress' actions were not driven purely by fear or cruelty. They were calculated, yes, but shaped by isolation, the burden of responsibility, and a desire to be respected, even if respect was masked as terror. Kale also learned the harsh lessons of her leadership. The Empress' cruelty was sometimes necessary. She eliminated threats decisively, even brutally. He witnessed her ordering the destruction of a rebellion that had been stirring in a distant system. Thousands of lives were lost, and yet Kale could see that she calculated each action with precision, seeking to minimize unnecessary loss while ensuring control. She was a ruler of survival, not senseless violence. Yet behind every act of fear there was the faint trace of longing. Kale noticed it in her rare smile at a clever solution, in the softening of her eyes when she looked at the stars, in the way she lingered over relics from her ancestors. It was subtle, fleeting, and almost invisible to anyone not trained to notice. But Kale noticed. And that notice, he realized, was the first step toward understanding her entirely. One night, as the two walked again in the gardens, the Empress spoke of herself more openly than she ever had. "The galaxy fears me because it believes fear is power. It does not understand the loneliness that comes with it, the endless calculations, the constant vigilance. Even I, who command fleets and armies, feel the weight of isolation. Fear is easier than understanding, and insight can change the outcome of even the most impossible situations." He saw a ruler shaped by necessity, isolated by her own abilities and yearning for understanding. He knew that if he could survive her court, if he could continue to observe and engage with her, he might glimpse what no one else had, the heart beneath the nightmare. And so Kale waited, watched, and learned. Each day was a test, each conversation a subtle negotiation. He had survived the first challenges of the Zalnith court. He had observed the Empress, understood a fraction of her mind, and discovered hints of the being behind the legend. The galaxy feared her. They would soon act. But Kale had a different plan, not to challenge her, not to oppose her, but to understand her. And in that understanding, he believed, lay the key to survival, not just for himself, but perhaps for the Empress as well. For the first time in centuries, he thought, maybe the universe could see the Empress for what she truly was. Not just a nightmare, but a being capable of far more than anyone dared imagine. And Kale, human from a death world, intended to see it first. Kale had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the palace, yet he never let himself become too comfortable. Every day, the Zalnith court revealed new dangers, subtle tests, and tiny openings that could either save or end a life. The Empress had begun to show small signs of trust, but trust in her court was a dangerous thing, and Kale knew it had to be earned carefully, step by step. The news arrived quietly, almost as a whisper. There were rumors of rebellion. Far in the outskirts of her empire, a system of planets had begun organizing against her rule. Some factions had survived her fleets, attacks in previous years, hiding in the shadows, and now they had resurfaced. Kale could see the concern behind the Empress' eyes, though she did not show it openly. Even she, feared by billions, had to calculate each move with precision. The council gathered to discuss the situation, and Kale observed, as always, taking mental notes. The generals debated fiercely, proposing destruction, blockade, or negotiation. Their voices were measured, yet beneath the surface ran tension, ambition, and fear. Kale noticed subtle gestures, the flicker of an eye, the tremor of a limb, the hesitation in a tone that revealed much more than the words themselves. "You will strike first," one general urged, his extra limbs gesturing aggressively. "Delay will give them strength." A ruler who could delay the instinct to destroy, who could see beyond immediate threats, held power not just in force but in wisdom. Later, Kale was summoned privately. The Empress spoke without pretense. "You watch and learn quickly, human. You notice details others ignore. I need your insight. What do you see in this rebellion?" "They are desperate," he said. "Not all of them fight for power. Many fight for survival, for freedom from fear. They hide where your fleets cannot reach, using tactics designed to avoid confrontation. Some are clever enough to exploit weaknesses you cannot afford to ignore. Understanding is, if you understand why they resist, you can act without overextending your forces. You can win without needless loss." Over the next week, Kale accompanied her fleet commanders on reconnaissance missions, observing both strategy and morale. He noted how her ships moved like extensions of her mind, each crew trained to anticipate commands before they were given. Even in the vastness of space, Kale could see patterns, weaknesses, and possibilities that the Council overlooked. It was during one mission that Kale truly understood the Empress' genius. A rebel fleet had appeared near a supply system, attempting to blockade resources. The generals suggested an immediate assault, confident in their numbers and firepower. Kale observed quietly, calculating. The Empress paused. "Attack blindly," she said, "and we risk more than we gain." The result was devastating for the rebels. Their blockade was broken without unnecessary casualties, and their fleet scattered in confusion. Kale could not help but admire her precision. She did not destroy recklessly. She calculated, minimized loss, and maintained fearsome control. When the battle ended, Kale saw a rare moment of reflection in her eyes. She did not smile, she did not celebrate. But there was a softness, a quiet satisfaction that came from accomplishing a task perfectly. And Kale realized that her fearsome reputation was a shield, a mask worn to protect herself from loneliness, vulnerability, and misunderstanding. The palace, however, was not as calm. News of the rebellion emboldened dissenters within her own ranks. Advisors whispered, generals muttered, and spies moved silently. Kale began to detect patterns, subtle enough that most humans would miss them entirely, but clear to someone trained in observation and survival. There were plots forming, small, clever, dangerous, and the Empress, brilliant as she was, could not see all of them at once. Kale decided to act carefully, discreetly. He began by subtly warning loyalists of potential threats, providing advice that could prevent sabotage or betrayal. His actions went unnoticed by those plotting against the Empress, yet they shifted outcomes in her favor. Each time, Kale reminded himself, survival in this place required more than strength, it required patience, perception, and timing. The Empress noticed his subtle effectiveness. One evening, she confronted him privately. "You intervene without command," she said, her tone sharp but not accusatory. "Why?" "Most humans fear, flatter, or flee, you see." Days later, Kale received an urgent message. The rebel leaders had infiltrated the council's ranks, attempting to sway generals and advisors. Their plan was clever, subtle, and potentially catastrophic. Kale analyzed the situation, tracing their actions through small clues, misdirected reports, unusual orders, hesitations in speech, shifts in routine. He devised a plan to expose the conspirators without alerting them prematurely. The execution required precision. Kale moved silently through the palace corridors, using his Deathworlder instincts to anticipate guard movements, avoid surveillance, and position key allies in critical points. The conspirators, confident in their secrecy, never suspected the human's subtle influence. When the Empress called the council to address the rebellion within, the conspirators were caught unprepared. Kale had arranged events so that their plans were revealed naturally, without forcing confrontation. The Empress observed, her expression unreadable. Yet Kale saw a flicker of satisfaction when the leaders were exposed, not for cruelty, but for justice and order. In the aftermath, the Empress and Kale walked together in the gardens, the luminescent plants casting soft light across their path. Silence stretched between them, comfortable yet meaningful. "You act boldly for one so small in this court," she said finally. "Your methods are unorthodox but effective. You are unlike any human I have encountered." "Perhaps, but on my world, size matters little. Wit, patience, and understanding matter more. Not for your skill, but for your reputation. Not just for them, but for you." But Kale, human from a world of survival and harsh lessons, had begun to show her another way, through understanding, observation, and subtle influence. The following days brought further tests. Kale was tasked with attending secret briefings, monitoring potential rebellions, and advising loyalists. Each task required ingenuity, patience, and subtlety. He discovered small cracks in the loyalty of some generals, whispers of doubt among advisors, and even hints of plots designed to exploit the Empress' reputation. Each time, Kale acted quietly, preventing disaster without revealing his own hand. Through it all, the Empress continued to observe him. Her trust grew slowly, measured in moments of silent approval, subtle gestures, and occasional questions about his insights. Kale knew better than to mistake these small signs for friendship, yet he valued them deeply. In a court built entirely on fear, such trust was rare, and power came with the burden of isolation. One night, Kale reflected on what he had learned. The Empress was feared, yes, and rightly so. Her fleets could destroy entire systems. Her intelligence and discipline were unmatched. But beneath the legend of terror, Kale saw something else, a being shaped by survival, isolation, and the weight of command. She was lonely, misunderstood, and desperately in need of insight and understanding. Kale had come to the conclusion that the galaxy's view of her was incomplete. They saw only the nightmare, the destruction, the fear. He saw strategy, intelligence, and a longing for recognition. He understood that if he could continue to observe, advise, and subtly influence, he might be able to prevent unnecessary bloodshed and help the Empress see herself differently, not as a weapon alone, but as a ruler capable of understanding, connection, and perhaps even trust. The galaxy still feared her. Spies, rebels, and traitors moved unseen, plotting her downfall. But Kale, human from a death world, had begun to carve a path through the shadows. He had learned to anticipate, influence, and act without alerting those who sought chaos. And in doing so, he had earned something few ever did: the quiet attention and subtle trust of Empress Zirha herself. As he walked through the gardens one final time that evening, Kale felt a quiet satisfaction. The palace remained a place of danger, the court a place of subtle treachery, and the galaxy a place of fear. Yet Kale knew one thing with certainty. Understanding could be more powerful than terror, and even the universe's greatest nightmare could change, if someone was willing to see her differently. He looked at the stars, and in their cold, distant light, he saw the faintest possibility of hope. Kale woke to the subtle hum of the palace, the kind of sound that could lull an untrained mind into complacency. He did not sleep long. Danger had a way of moving quietly in the Zalnith dominion, like shadows slipping between light. For someone from a death world, the threat was familiar, constant, invisible, and patient. Today, he knew, would test him more than any battle in open space ever could. The news arrived without fanfare. A coup had begun. Advisors he had once seen as loyal were gathering support for a rebellion, seeking to overthrow the Empress while her fleets were engaged elsewhere. Kale analyzed the situation instantly. The conspirators were clever, moving in small groups, using subtle influence and coded communication to manipulate generals and spies. If unchecked, they could topple the Dominion from within before the Empress even knew it. Kale did not hesitate. He moved swiftly, quietly, relying on instincts honed on Varkesh Prime. He contacted key loyalists discreetly, using subtle gestures, private messages, and hidden signals to warn them. No one could know he was acting. Discovery would cost him his life. He set small traps of information, guiding the conspirators toward exposure without revealing his own involvement. His plan was not violence first. It was observation, patience, and precise intervention. Meanwhile, the Empress sensed the unrest. She did not panic, though Kale could feel her tension. She was accustomed to control, to fear, and to the obedience of her council. This, however, was different. The enemy was inside her walls, inside her court, using her own systems against her. She had survived countless battles, but even she had to rely on insight beyond her own perception. Kale entered her private chamber, careful not to alert any of the hidden conspirators. She did not look at him immediately, her eyes focused on a holographic display showing fleet positions, council movements, and planetary systems. "They believe they can outwit me," she said finally. "They think they understand my rule." And humans notice details others miss. Small actions can prevent large disasters. "Proceed." Then the first confrontation occurred. A minor advisor attempted to sabotage the Empress' communications, hoping to prevent her from issuing fleet commands. Kale anticipated it, intercepting the attempt and redirecting it to reveal the conspirators' identity without alarming anyone. The advisor, thinking they were clever, unwittingly exposed a network of fellow plotters. Kale's Deathworlder instincts for prediction and timing had worked. The Empress noticed the outcomes without needing Kale to explain. She watched as conspirators began making mistakes, tripping over the very systems they sought to manipulate. Kale understood that observation alone was insufficient. He had to guide events without interference. It required patience, foresight, and restraint, skills he had learned through years of survival on a harsh planet. Meanwhile, whispers in the council grew louder. Generals questioned each other, advisors cast doubt, and fear spread through the conspirators. Kale observed all of it, noting which individuals could be persuaded, which had to be isolated, and which were beyond recovery. He communicated with the Empress through small gestures and subtle signals, ensuring she remained in control while remaining unaware of his full involvement. The coup escalated when one conspirator attempted to rally a small fleet stationed in orbit. Kale had already anticipated this move. He orchestrated a countermeasure using loyal commanders, arranging for their ships to intercept the traitors' vessels quietly, minimizing bloodshed while ensuring their surrender. When the Empress issued her command to neutralize the threat, the fleet moved in perfect alignment, unaware that the true guidance had come from a human. Afterward, Kale debriefed the Empress privately. "They are contained," he said simply. "Their plans have failed, loyalists remain in position, no major casualties among the fleet or council." Observation, patience, and subtle action often outweigh open combat. In some ways, he realized, humans were uniquely suited for this task. Their survival instincts, adaptability, and understanding of danger gave them advantages even in an alien court where raw strength ruled. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Kale continued to monitor potential threats, advise loyalists, and subtly manipulate events. He remained invisible to the conspirators, who began to suspect nothing, their plans unraveling before their eyes. The Empress observed his results, quietly impressed, and began to rely on his insights more than she had initially admitted. But Kale's actions were not without risk. One conspirator, sensing the tide turning, attempted to eliminate him. Kale anticipated the attack, drawing on every lesson from the Deathworlds: timing, movement, and anticipation of predator behavior. He avoided the trap, and in doing so led the conspirator into a position where their betrayal was exposed. The Empress' judgment was swift and absolute. The conspirator was removed from power and their network collapsed. Kale realized that the Empress was beginning to see him not merely as a human envoy but as a valuable ally. Her trust, though unspoken, grew incrementally. She consulted him quietly on strategy, allowed him closer access to council decisions, and even permitted him to walk alongside her in private gardens, a privilege few outsiders ever enjoyed. During one of these walks, she spoke softly. "You are different from other humans," she said. "Most fear me, most seek to please or escape. You observe and act. You see beyond fear and respect. Why? But insight allows you to guide what you can." Yet in trusting him, she began to glimpse another path, one where understanding, not terror, could command loyalty. The coup left the palace in cautious quiet. Advisors were watched, generals were tested, and Kale remained vigilant. The Empress, while still formidable, showed rare moments of reflection. She consulted Kale not only on rebellion, but on the nature of loyalty, the weight of command, and the limits of fear as a tool. One evening, after a long day of council deliberations, the Empress spoke to Kale alone. "You have saved me in ways the galaxy does not see," she said quietly. "Not through combat, not through force, but through observation and judgment. I do not know if I have ever trusted anyone so completely." She was beginning to see him not just as an envoy, not just as a human, but as a partner in understanding the complexities of power, loyalty, and survival. The events of the coup had changed the palace. Fear remained, as it always would, but subtlety had proven its value. Kale's presence had altered the course of events without bloodshed, without alerting the conspirators, and without compromising the Empress' authority. The galaxy still feared her, but now Kale had begun to teach her that fear was not the only way to maintain control. In the quiet hours of the night, Kale reflected on what he had learned. The Empress, for all her power, was human in ways the galaxy had never seen. She desired understanding, she craved connection, and she bore the weight of isolation in silence. Kale, from a world of survival, harshness, and constant danger, had begun to bridge the gap. He realized that the path ahead would not be simple. More threats would emerge, more conspiracies would attempt to topple her rule, and the galaxy's perception of the Empress would remain unchanged. Yet he also knew that he had the tools to influence outcomes, to guide events subtly, and perhaps to change not only her understanding of trust, but the way she ruled the galaxy itself. Kale returned to his quarters, exhausted but alert. The coup had ended, but vigilance was far from over. He looked out at the stars beyond the palace, their distant light reflecting the countless challenges ahead. Survival was never guaranteed, yet he felt a quiet determination. For the first time, Kale believed that even the universe's greatest nightmare, the Empress herself, might be capable of something more than fear, destruction, and legend. She might be capable of trust, understanding, and perhaps even connection. And he, human from a death world, would be there to see it, guide it, and endure whatever dangers came next. The palace remained alive with unseen threats, whispers of rebellion, and subtle plots. Yet Kale moved through it all with clarity, skill, and patience. The galaxy still feared the Empress, and rightly so. But Kale had begun to see beyond that fear, and in doing so, he had begun to teach her the value of insight, loyalty, and quiet courage. As he prepared for the next day, Kale understood the truth. Power alone did not make a ruler feared or respected. Understanding, patience, and subtle action could shape empires, save lives, and even transform legends. He had survived death worlds, witnessed horrors, and navigated the most dangerous court in the galaxy. Yet the greatest challenge, and perhaps the greatest opportunity, was only beginning. And in that challenge, Kale felt the spark of hope, not just for himself, but for Empress Zirha, the universe's greatest nightmare, who might finally learn that even the most powerful beings need understanding and trust to survive and thrive. The calm after the coup was deceptive. Though the conspirators had been exposed and neutralized, Kale knew the galaxy did not remain still for long. Rumors began to circulate of a new threat, one older and far more dangerous than any rebellion the Empress had faced. Ancient, intelligent, and vast, it had observed the Zalnith dominion from beyond the known systems, feeding on fear and chaos. Its presence was subtle at first, sensed only through anomalies in energy fields, disruptions in communications, and strange patterns in deep space scans. The Empress studied the reports silently. Her eyes, sharp as ever, scanned every detail. Unlike other rulers, she did not panic. She weighed probabilities, calculated risks, and considered strategies. Kale watched her, noticing the tension beneath her composed exterior. This threat was unlike any she had faced. Fleets and fear alone might not be enough to defeat it. She would need insight, patience, and cooperation. "You understand this better than most," she said finally, addressing Kale. "What do you see?" "It feeds on fear," he said. "Not ships, not planets, it thrives on terror and chaos. The more the galaxy panics, the stronger it becomes. We cannot confront it with force alone. We must act strategically, decisively, and without fear. Fear is its weapon. Understanding is ours." The Zalnith, though disciplined and intelligent, had never relied on subtlety outside of internal politics. Kale's perspective was new, unexpected, and invaluable. When the alien entity finally made its presence known, it was not with a roar or explosion. It arrived as a disruption in the very fabric of space, a ripple of dissonance that unsettled minds and sensors alike. Ships faltered, communications failed, and even the Empress' vast intelligence network registered anomalies that defied conventional explanation. Fear began to creep into the hearts of many commanders. Kale moved among the fleets, offering calm, reasoned guidance. He reminded them to trust strategy over instinct, observation over panic. He anticipated the entity's movements, predicting disruptions before they occurred, guiding the Empress' fleet to positions that minimized risk and maximized control. The Empress observed silently, occasionally consulting Kale on subtle shifts in the entity's patterns. Together, they developed a strategy that combined raw power with human ingenuity. The Zalnith ships formed precise formations designed to channel the entity's influence into harmless vectors, while smaller teams moved to disrupt its energy sources. Kale coordinated these movements, reading signals, predicting reactions, and adjusting positions in real time. For hours, the galaxy seemed to hang in suspense. The entity's presence was overwhelming, feeding on fear as predicted. Some ships faltered, and minor panic threatened to spread. Kale moved among the officers, speaking in calm tones, guiding actions, and reminding them to trust calculation over instinct. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The entity, powerful as it was, had never faced a force that acted without fear. Its influence waned as the humans and Zalnith executed the strategy flawlessly. The turning point came when Kale noticed a pattern in the entity's energy signature, a repetition that suggested vulnerability. He relayed the observation to the Empress. "It reacts to fear. If we act without it, we create weakness," he explained. The Empress nodded. "Then we will show no fear." Their maneuvers were precise, almost instinctive. The entity, expecting panic and chaos, encountered only controlled strategy and confidence. Its attacks failed to disrupt formations, and Kale's predictions allowed the Zalnith to counter each move before it became a threat. At the climax, the Empress and Kale coordinated a focused strike on the entity's core energy field. It was a delicate operation requiring precision timing, flawless execution, and calm nerves. Kale had prepared simulations, analyzed countless possibilities, and guided loyal commanders through the maneuvers. The Empress, commanding immense power, executed the strike flawlessly. The entity faltered, unable to feed on fear as intended. Its energy destabilized, and with a final coordinated strike from the fleet, it disintegrated into harmless particles, leaving no trace except the relief of those who survived. Kale exhaled slowly, feeling the tension leave him. Around him, the Zalnith fleet recovered from the battle, their confidence and trust in their leader reaffirmed. The Empress stood at the command deck, her expression calm but reflective. She had faced terror, survived, and emerged victorious, not through fear alone, but through insight, strategy, and human guidance. After the fleet returned to the capital, Kale and the Empress walked together in the gardens. The luminescent plants glowed softly, a stark contrast to the cold void they had just navigated. Silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. "You acted well," she said finally. "Not as a soldier, not as a spy, but as a human who understands survival, strategy, and insight. You have shown me a new way to command, a new way to endure, and a new way to be feared without needless destruction." You survived because you planned, calculated, and trusted insight over instinct. I merely helped you see what was already there. But insight, strategy, and trust can be stronger than fear. You have proven that today. You commanded fleets, guided humans and Zalnath alike, and survived a threat that preyed on panic. The galaxy may still call you a nightmare, but you are more than that. You are a ruler who can endure, adapt, and lead without needless fear. In the days that followed, the Empress began to rule with subtlety and insight. She listened more, observed more, and acted with precision rather than impulse. She began to consult Kale not only on military strategy, but on governance, diplomacy, and understanding the galaxy she commanded. He advised discreetly, subtly, and wisely, never undermining her authority but helping her see new perspectives and possibilities. The galaxy began to notice a change. While the Empress' reputation remained formidable, there were reports of measured decisions, successful diplomacy, and restraint in conflicts. Tales of her cunning and intelligence spread alongside stories of her fearsome power. And Kale, though human and far from his death world, had become an integral part of the Dominion's leadership, valued not for strength, but for perception, insight, and courage. One evening, Kale and the Empress stood on a balcony overlooking the city. The lights shimmered below, reflecting in the calm waters of the palace gardens. "You have changed much in a short time," Kale said. "The galaxy still fears you, but perhaps it respects you in ways it never could before. We endure, adapt, and survive, and sometimes we help others do the same." The galaxy would continue to fear her. Fleets would continue to obey, planets would continue to quake at her command, and legends of her might would spread far beyond the Dominion. Yet Kale knew the truth, and the Empress was beginning to understand it as well. Power was not only force, it was understanding, observation, and the courage to act wisely. And in that knowledge, they were stronger than the galaxy could ever imagine. Kale thought of Varkesh Prime, of its harsh deserts, its predators, and the lessons it had taught him. Survival required more than strength. It required understanding, strategy, and patience. And now, those lessons had saved not just him, but the Empress, the Dominion, and perhaps the galaxy itself. The Empress placed a hand lightly on the balcony railing. "Perhaps one day," she said softly, "the galaxy will see me as more than a nightmare. Perhaps they will understand that even the most feared rulers can choose insight over fear. That is true power." And Kale, human from a death world, had been there every step of the way. He had seen the nightmare, understood it, and helped transform it into a ruler capable of more than fear could command. As the night deepened and the lights of the city shimmered below, Kale realized the truth that had guided him from the very beginning. Even the universe's greatest nightmare could be something more. Something capable of understanding, connection, and profound insight. And perhaps, just perhaps, even the most feared being in the galaxy simply wanted to be seen, understood, and respected. Kale smiled quietly. The universe was dangerous, unpredictable, and full of wonders. But with insight, patience, and courage, even the darkest legends could be reshaped. And the galaxy would never be the same.